First and foremost, we actually here at Revise have a pretty strict artificial intelligence policy. We actually we restrict all uses of AI. We will remove all of the AI note-taking apps that attend the session, including but not limited to Otter AI, Fireflies AI, Phantom AI, etc., for our data privacy purposes. We prohibit all others from recording or screenshotting the content shared today. To access our full privacy policy, please visit our Informal Science website. I believe somebody is going to drop that in the chat, informalscience.org/privacy. Second, this webinar is being recorded? Question mark? Kim?
Yes, we're recording right now.
Like, why did I miss that? I did not hear. Normally I hear her, Siri or whoever say, okay, the webinar is being recorded and we prohibit all others from recording. We will upload the links for this, for the recording, as soon as we, you know, format it and make it available. That is also going to be on our website. For those who may need it, closed captioning is available. To enable closed captions, click on the CC icon in the meeting's control toolbar. The toolbar is usually located at the bottom of the webinar window. Once closed captions are enabled, they will be displayed in a new closed caption box, and you should be able to click and drag the caption box to move the position that, into the position that you would like it to be. Finally, all attendees can leverage the chat and QA features. We actually encourage that, right? Please take a moment to identify the chat and QA icons in your meeting controls toolbar. You can access these features by clicking on those icons. Please submit questions via the Q&A feature or even chat. You can drop comments and questions in the chat. We're chill. Okay. This webinar is actually part of the center's larger goal of providing resources to informal science education. So it is our goal that this webinar offers a harassment-free environment and that it's just a welcoming experience for everyone. As such, we offer our session engagement norms to guide engagements during today's session. So we have 3, your story, your choice. You decide how and which stories you want to share and which to keep to yourself. 2, reciprocity and accountability. We ask that everyone in attendance interact with respect to everyone else. And then 3, conversations end in a comma, not a period. We're hoping that the conversations that we have here today are, seeds for future connections, collaborations, discussions. And so we really hope that you carry this momentum with you into the field after this session. Also, because the Revise Center is dedicated to informal science, and we do a lot of work around, we're a resource center for the informal science solicitations. I want to remind you all that NSF is accepting proposals for the STEM K-12 solicitation. There are rolling deadlines. And so this is a bit of a shift. There used to be a formal deadline, but we just want to let you all know in case you weren't aware of the change. It's a rolling deadline now, right? So more opportunities to submit. I want to pay attention to a couple things about that STEM K-12 solicitation. One, there is a expansive focus, even though, it says, the title says K-12, and it can seem like that means proposals should only focus on formal STEM, like formal classrooms. It's actually informal as well. It's pretty much all cases of STEM learning, and it's also from birth through life, right? So it doesn't have to be elementary students. It can be adult learners, right? We really support lifelong learning as long as there is a STEM focus. So keep that in mind. While NSF has been pretty adamant about AI proposals because that's a priority, they also want us to know that that's not their only interest, right? So if you have a proposal and it's not focused on AI, we are still very much interested in receiving those proposals. Those proposals will be evaluated the same. So there isn't necessarily some priority for reviewing those AI only applications, right? It's informal STEM is the focus. And we also have some other options, right? If you are like, oh, I wonder if STEM K-12 is a right fit, or maybe you want to do STEM K-12 and something else, right? I just want to note that there are other things such as eager, rapid, planning proposals. Please refer to the NSF PPG for additional instructions on how to prepare those. Okay, I'm trying to get y'all resources. And with that, I'd love to welcome our first project panelists to the virtual stage. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can see all of them. Okay.
Ready to go?
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm ready.
All right. Thank you. Let me just share my screen. All right. And Monet and I are going to split this presentation. So I'm going to have Monet start and I'm going to pick up kind of midway through.
All right. So Kevin and I are here today to represent, as it says, the Utilizing Library System for Virtual Reality and Learning Experiences to Engage Rural Communities in Polar Research project. And we are in our final year of this project. And Kevin, if you want to switch to the next piece. So this project is a partnership between the folks below. I work for the Institute for Learning Innovation as our Director of Evaluation. Kevin, I'm going to have you give your title this time because I botched it last time.
So I'm a professor at the University of Wisconsin, but I'm part of the Wisconsin Institute for Discovery, so it's a research institute. And then we
Thank you.
also have Field Day, who we work with. They're part of UW-Madison. They build learning games, and you can see kind of the different affiliations. And then we
Yeah.
also have libraries from all over the state. So this is we have interactive maps. So you can better see where everyone's from.
Yeah. So if you go to our website, we do have a website associated with the project, which is easy to find by typing in that title. And it shows the 5 years of fellowships that we have done on this project. And the leading question has been, how might rural librarians utilize VR, particularly like a very immersive VR, to engage patrons in polar research and improve STEM, but particularly polar identity and a sense of belonging for rural patrons. Our initial target, below that sub-target, was Latin community members. And so that's what we've been working on for the last 5 years. And so, like I said, we started with rural and Latin, and that was driven by the idea that there were few students who came to the college to seek such things, and also there's a lack of access for folks who are from rural, particularly Latin rural populations. And we spent a lot of time thinking about how do we design. I think, Kevin, if you click a little map shows up. Oh, no, it doesn't.
Oh,
Go
yeah.
back one, please.
Yep.
So I was just going to say what we really spent time thinking about was how do we design for this audience? What do we need to think about? Things like design elements. If you play one of the games, you'll see that there are design elements that reflect rural and particularly Latin populations. We are experimenting with different voices to see if that has an influence. And we have programming and support materials for the libraries that are both in English and Spanish and hopefully reflect some of the local cultural pieces. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. And as I mentioned, so over the life of this project, we have held a yearly librarian workshop fellowship that has lasted the entire year. So they usually started around August and spent the year. And then the librarians got to send things to like Antarctica and have their pictures taken. They were included as part of what we did. If you want to click to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are just some of the things that the librarians did. So part of the fellowship piece was that we were hoping for mostly a co-design process, and particularly around the programming that happened around the VR and how the VR would be utilized in library spaces. And so what you can see here is some of the librarians held penguin days, and they did things with different polar excursions in their libraries, and some of them are really, really neat. And this year, I think I can't remember if it's the next slide. Go ahead. One more there, Kevin.
Mhm.
Um, so where we're at is we're in our last year. And this year, what we've done is we've invited back five of the librarians who have participated with us in the past. But over the course of the 5 years, and we've learned a fair number of things from rural librarians. Um, and one, for those of you who are working in informal spaces, hopefully you understand or have had experience with that libraries are varied, right? So unlike some of our after school spaces or other traditional learning spaces, the audiences in libraries in particular are very varied and not predictable. So it's been a challenge for us to think about that. Experiences in VR need to be shorter, not longer for a library space typically for the type of programming that they offer. And and new technology, especially in rural libraries where they have few staff and need significant support typically. And so we need to do training in how VR is utilized. They don't have a tech person typically on staff. So we need to think about how we support that. A big concern of our libraries was like, what happens if this breaks? Because we gave everyone the technology, and so we've helped work through like, okay, if that breaks, we'll get you a new one, those sorts of things. And when you work with libraries, their programs are usually structured out at least 3 months, if not more, ahead of time. So when we were co-designing, like where we're at right now, you really have to think that really they're not going to implement this until probably the late fall. And so you need that lead time when you're working with the librarians. Go ahead and switch to the next slide, Kevin. So where are we headed? So like I said, we pulled together five of our librarians who we felt really exemplified the program over the last several years, and are having them help us think about how can we do this really well. So we've experimented with many different ways of utilizing the VR inside these spaces and how to attract the audiences that are the target audience. And so now we want to think, how can we do this best? And so they're helping us co-design a family style event. They picked out that event. It's going to be actually an escape room that ties into the VR. So the two things are going to blend together. Um, and our research is really going to really focus in this year on the short term. So rather than looking over kind of long-term changes, we're looking at individuals that use this and like what are some of their thought processes in the moment. Um, but the librarians need support over the long term. So we're sticking with them for this next year, and they've been our partners to really think about how do we continue to embed and improve the utilization of media and projects like this within their spaces, especially these rural spaces that are under-resourced. And we're spending all the time co-creating. So we've brought in a librarian who specializes in this type of programming. One of our project partners who works for the DPI in Wisconsin, and myself are helping lead the librarians through this co-design process, which has been lots of fun and fun to think about. And so right now, that's where we are with what Kevin's going to dive deeper into here in a moment, about how are we best utilizing programming like this, resources like this in rural library spaces for informal learning. Kevin, you can switch to the next.
Yeah. So I'll just briefly, this is, session on film and media. So I just want to talk briefly about why virtual reality as a medium. So virtual reality has a couple different things you can do that are a little bit atypical from other medias. And so some of the different psychologies of VR is that VR can create these different types of illusions that are kind of unique. So one of them is this idea that it can put you in a different place. So it can make you feel like you're in a different place than your physical body is. So this is called place illusion. Another one is called plausibility illusion. So this is the idea that we can make somebody feel like something that is happening to them, even though it's not. So, this is a depiction of like they'll do studies where they'll have somebody feel like they're in a bar fight or something like that, or being kind of yelled at. Um, and then the final one is called embodiment. And so this is the idea that we can make it so you can feel like your body is something different than your own physical body. And this is really interesting. So there's lots of really great work out there in which people embody people of different genders and different races, um, different heights, different ages, all kinds of different things. But what we were interested in this project is what happens if you embody another species? What happens if you embody a penguin? And what does that do? And then also, we were interested, what happens if you embody a scientist? How does this change your science perception and what you think about these different things? So, we worked with an author of a book, Jean Pennycook. So she wrote this great book called Waiting for Joey about these Adelie penguins. And so what we want to do is take that book and transform it so in VR you actually get to become a penguin. And so you waddle around like a penguin. We have it so you go through different parts of a penguin's life cycle. It's cartoonish and playful, but what's really interesting is what we found is that in terms of informal learning, we do see that when people do these experiences, we see gains in learning. But what's more interesting is that we see increases in empathy, and we see this correlation between empathy and embodiment. So the more people felt like they embodied a penguin, the more empathy they demonstrated toward penguins. Um, then we played around with other things of like, okay, so VR is this illusion. What if we purposely break it to try to teach people things? And we thought this was going to be detrimental. Lots of results here. You don't need to know all of them, but basically what we found is that this actually isn't the worst thing in the world. That people can recover from these illusion breaks, and actually this is beneficial toward informal learning. Um, so that was one of our experiences. We've created some other experiences. So we've created one where you embody a person who's fixing weather stations in the South Pole. And so you're fixing these weather stations, you're learning about weather station repair, but you're also seeing the effects of climate change and how these weather station repair operators work. And then most recently, we just released another VR experience called On the Ice Hatch, in which you actually get to embody Gene Pennycook. You are a scientist in the South Pole studying penguins. You're looking at, how penguins interact, their life cycles, but learning that type of science. And so what's really fun is the new thing we're going to do this year is we're going to actually study what is the difference between embodying a polar scientist and embodying a penguin. And how does that change empathy and learning and all of this? We have no idea. We're super excited on the study because we have no idea what the results of the study are going to be. Um, Another thing that's I think been really exciting for me is that there's a thing called open game data that we have tied into. So this keeps track of all these data logs. So every time anyone plays any of our games, their session is recorded. It's completely anonymous. These data come out once per month, but with these huge data logs, thousands and thousands and thousands of sessions. And so we do fun things like visualize where people go in our games and look at what they do. But most recently, we have a paper we just submitted in which we now use AI, and we've found that if we just look at things like subtle rotations of their head, we can start to predict, are they going to finish the game? Are they going to quit the game? Are they going to have a bad experience? So it's been really useful because these type of data sets of just thousands and thousands and thousands of play sessions just don't really exist. And so this is a really unique aspect that we've been able to generate in this project. And what's also cool, so we generate all of these VR experiences for libraries, but these are all freely available on the Meta App Store. So if you have a Quest headset, all four of the experiences we made for this project are out there. They're totally free. They're kind of fun, informal learning experiences. And so with that, I know we're kind of running out of time, but yeah, so our website is polarvr.wis.edu if you want to find out more. And I can stop sharing screen.
I love this. As an K-8 educator, I was like, oh my gosh, I have Quest VR glasses. So I was like, I need to find these resources. Thank you. I'm gonna hold off any questions until the end. I think that I tried to grab that link, but if it's not the link, y'all, I'm sorry.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
I tried to grab it really quick
It's
while
almost right. It's
it's
VR. So
almost right. Yeah, it's
polar
Polar VR.
VR.
I'll put it in the link. I'll put it in the chat.
don't click on whatever that link is. Okay. Thank you all. I want to invite our presentation number 2 panelists to the stage, who are going to be talking to us about Ice World. Hello, hello. I think we have one more panelist somewhere. There we go. All right, y'all. I'll let you introduce yourself and take us to Ice World.
Okay, hi, I guess I'll start. I'm Deborah Roxani. I am a producer with Giant Screen Films. We're a company that makes large format films for museums and science centers. That was our original function. And as the media has evolved, we've also branched out into lots of other categories, but the giant screen is the heart of what we do. Patty, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Patty Lowe. I'm a retired university professor, emerita from UW-Madison and more recently from Northwestern University. I'm a citizen of Mashgazibi, the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Ojibwe. And for the past 20 years, I've been helping tribal teens create stories about environmental change in their communities.
Okay, give me 1 second here, Patty, to share our presentation. For some reason, I don't see it coming up on Zoom, so hang on. All right.
Well, while you're doing that, should I talk a little bit about the Tribal Youth Media workshops?
Well, I think
Or
I'm
you have it?
ready now. Give me one
Okay.
second. Sorry, I apologize, everyone. Okay, here we go.
Oh, good.
Oh, but that's not what I want to play. Sorry, Al. We were doing so great in the rehearsal. Patty, why don't you? Okay, so here we go. How's that look?
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay, here we are. All right, so our project is a multi-component media and education initiative. We're, as our big goal, hoping to improve polar science knowledge for lifelong learners and to cultivate positive STEM attitudes, interests, and beliefs, particularly for middle school aged kids. And we also have a project piece that is a capacity building effort. That's a science storytelling PD program for museum and science center educators. And this is a fitting webinar for our project because the storyline of storytelling kind of just runs through everything that we're trying to do. The center of our project is a large format film. Just as background, giant screens are mostly located in museums and science centers and aquaria, and they're huge. Our audience consists of lifelong learners, so there's kids and grandparents and every level of education and interest in our audience, which is challenging and also fun because people are coming into these spaces expecting to be entertained, but also wanting to learn. And like the project we just saw, there are some kind of unique attributes to the giant screen that are kind of different than other forms of media. We know that they're really effective at imparting a sense of wonder or awe. They create a sense of immersion, which we call presence. It's the feeling of actually being there. And with this kind of storytelling, we don't try to load it up with information. We try to use visuals and sounds and the whole experience to create a wow moment, which is sometimes like a moment of surprise or something that helps you see something in a way that you couldn't imagine before. And evaluations have shown that large format films that introduce characters, human motivations, role models, and really engage the dramatic and storytelling potential of a medium are what's most effective at learning. So when it comes to polar science, typically, like a lot of the films and storytelling that we've seen, in spite of the fact that the poles are really linked to the rest of the planet, really kind of focuses on the remoteness and the iconic animals and the ice and the imagery that sort of distance us from these places. And so our concept with this project was to think, can giant screen films and other forms of media help people see themselves as part of the natural world and more connected to it? And does that understanding then sort of support STEM learning, STEM interest, and a sense that it matters. What happens at the poles matters to the rest of the planet. So what we're trying to do with all of our project elements is to use a more human lens on this science storytelling than we often do. And the big question is, can all of this storytelling help audiences recognize that what happens at the polls matters everywhere? As far as the giant screen film, the way that we're going about this is also new and different for me. We are working very closely with two villages in a place called St. Lawrence Island that's in the North Bering Sea. We have advisors and community members who have helped sort of co-design what the story that we're telling is. That's been a long, involved process, and I can tell you more about that later if you're interested. But this is one of the most dynamic places on the planet where the sea ice advances and retreats on a yearly basis. And it has sort of shaped life for time immemorial, and that is changing. So it's a very interesting place to look at. Here's a 1-minute clip just to kind of set the stage. Hopefully this plays.
115 miles off the coast of mainland Alaska, less than 40 miles away from Siberia. It's a 90-mile-long island of tundra, dormant volcanoes, lakes, and marshland. In winter, temperatures drop and our home expands, stretching out as far as the eye can see over the vast plains of ice covering the Bering Sea. We may be a small island, but we share lifestyles and experiences with the circumpolar community. We have all learned to embrace the cold, to connect with nature, and to connect with each other.
Okay. So now that we've set the stage, a big part of the story, which is something that we arrived at through a very long formative evaluation process with our collaborators, is it is a wildlife story, but it's a story about people and the Pacific walrus, because in this place, just about every aspect of identity is tied up in the Pacific walrus. And it's also really interesting, I think, as a science story, because this is a place where Arctic stakeholders and knowledge holders and experts are doing a lot of collaboration with researchers to understand what's happening. And NSF has done some really wonderful projects that have to do with this. The people who we're working with on the island have done a lot of this work. So there's some cool intersections with it. One of the major differences between this project and other ones that we've done is that working in the Arctic is really hard, for one, and so it was really useful of cinematographers who we trained and worked with in both villages. And that just gave us access to life and the experience there in a way that we never could have had the opportunity to do without them. It has also been a happy problem in that we have so much material that we can't possibly use it all. And so I thought it would be nice to show you just some of the outtakes that we have here. And partly these are things that are not really giant screen suited. But one thing that you'll see here is one of our filmmakers' moms preparing reindeer meat, which is something that is really about adaptation right now as other marine resources are changing their migration habits and behavior. Reindeer is a really good solution, and that's something that people are moving towards. So I'll show you this next clip. Okay. So the film is really just sort of the anchor of what we're trying to do here. We are also thinking about how other forms of media and interventions can get us towards our goal. And we know that middle school age is a really pivotal moment for kids when they opt out of science. And so we thought, how could we do some outreach and additional work to connect the film to local people everywhere? And that's where Patty and the Tribal Youth Media Program came in. And I should just say, for the sake of clarity, that this was funded a few years back and all the work is done and completed. And it's a specific audience of Native youth that we were working with, but the outcomes were really interesting. So the premise for this is that we know that hands-on STEM learning is really linked to better STEM outcomes, and participation in science storytelling can support STEM learning, better critical thinking, and importantly, it can facilitate a sense of belonging in STEM. So I turned to Patty Lowe, who has done the Tribal Youth Media Workshops for many years, and she helped create 4 documentaries in different regions across the US with middle school aged youth, looking at environmental issues and solutions on tribal lands. And I think what's really cool about this is that kids involved in this work are not the subjects of the story, they are the authors of it. And I think what has come through really well is the connections to nature and all that. And I'll let Patty say a few words about that.
Thanks, Deb. Yeah, the 2 young women you're looking at on the screen produced a documentary, really interesting, very empowering documentary about how their community was constructing growing new islands basically by creating these huge log jams, log jams to create new islands in the Quinault River so that the salmon, which had been diminishing over a number of years, would have adequate spawning grounds. So I worked with this community, with the Porch Band of Creeks in Alabama, the Onondaga in New York, and my reservation. And we followed the protocol that we had developed over 20 years of working with middle and high school students. We'd go into the communities in the spring, we'd sit down and talk with elders, ask them, what do you want your children to learn about? And what are the best ways that you think your kids learn? So help us with learning techniques. Who should your kids interview? Who has the knowledge in the community? And so for this particular project at Bad River, my reservation, the elders told us they really wanted their kids to learn about Monoman, our wild rice, which connects to our spiritual and cultural selves. They wanted to focus on solarization because Bad River was creating solar microgrids and individual solarization on rooftops. And they wanted us to focus on the effect that flooding and environmental change was having on black ash, which is a relative that we use for black ash basket making. And I use that word intentionally because in other communities where natural resources are viewed as commodities, in our communities, they're viewed as relatives. And so, Deb, do you want to show the excerpt from the wild rice video?
Sure.
Welcome to Mushkazibing. This is where our medicine grows. Mushkazibing is what we call home, but others know us as the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Ojibwe. We live along the south shore of Lake Superior. In good years, as much as 800 acres of Manoomin or wild rice will grow here in the Kakagan Sloughs. It's August and we're ricing.
When I think of harvesting Manoomin, I think of the sound that you hear when you're out there and all the different sounds. So you hear the water, you hear all the different birds that are in that place that call that place home. You know, you hear the sound of that Manoomin, that as you're knocking that Manoomin into your canoe. You hear the sound of that Manoomin sprinkling into your canoe, which is a really beautiful sound too. You know, and so you hear all those sounds, and you know, to me, you know, I always just think of how grateful and how lucky we are to have that. So when I think of Manoomin and harvesting Manoomin, I think of all those things.
This place.
Anything you want to add to that, Patty?
Pardon?
Is there anything you want to add after that?
Yeah, I think you know, it's important to understand that our tribal youth media workshops are intended to grow the next generation of land stewards and storytellers, and also give our up and coming generations a voice. Because if you look at how our communities have been portrayed in the mainstream media, it seems like most of what you see focuses on our deficiencies. And yeah, you know, we've experienced generational trauma, but our communities didn't survive because of generational trauma. We survived because of generational joy and innovation and creativity. And so the stories that we picked about for this project were really empowering stories about how communities were adapting and innovating to the changes that were taking place that we see taking place in our communities.
So I don't want to go too deep into this. The evaluation that we did for this project, I think, was also very cool because we used a framework that was based on the values in Bad River. And we also used methods that were designed to get good feedback from kids, because this particular group of learners does not like taking a pen and pencil test. It doesn't do anything to make this a positive STEM learning experience. So we did a lot of conversations and observations. We talked to program alumni. So there was actually some longitudinal information about this, and just some of the highlights that STEM interest was really tremendously improved among kids who participated in this. They really liked connections between hydrology, landscapes, food systems were things that really became something they were interested and curious about. The longitudinal part showed that the program really did spark long-term interest in media, science, and creative arts. People noted that this workshop helped them realize their real passions. So it was really pivotal for people who did this program several years ago. And then I think another thing that's really important that came of this is that kids who participated found kind of two identities for themselves in this, that the stories and the work that they were learning about is part of their cultural self, and they felt good about that. But then being a storyteller and getting to share that and communicate it and thinking about it as a contribution to science really also helped support STEM identity. So you're working along both those lines, which was really a wonderful outcome, I think. And then while our film is still waiting to be released next year, we also have a capacity building effort for professionals. We're working with Science Center professionals at 5 different institutions, and they will all identify local stories and do their own version of a science storytelling program to go with the film, and then we'll compile the outcomes from that and put together some best practices to share. I think, Patty, do you have anything else to add?
You know, I was just going to mention anecdotally the career paths of 3 of our very early Tribal Youth Media Workshop alums. One became very interested in health sciences, got a full ride scholarship to Johns Hopkins University, and is now an epidemiologist. And this is really ironic because I'm working on a new edition of my book and going into Native communities and doing an update of the last 10 years. And an 11-year-old that I interviewed at our first tribal youth media workshop has her master's degree in science and is now the director of our energy programs. So, and then a third one who composed music for many of the documentaries during his year. Um, got a 4-year degree from a university in Wisconsin and is now a full-time music composer in St. Louis. So, those kinds of stories just, I can't tell you how they just really, really make me very happy. I'm smiling inside.
Not me caught cheesing. Yes, I've been smiling the entire time that you all have been presenting. Thank you so much for sharing about your work. Okay, so I actually have the pleasure of inviting, or I should say, you're already here on the screen. So presenting Kevin Clark from NSF, a senior program officer. Um, you know, we're so excited to have you here. You have a lot of expertise in this area. And so we invited Kevin here today to moderate this discussion. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to take a seat in the audience.
Thank you, Tara, and thank you to both groups for your presentations. It's always great to see the great work that is being done, particularly related to media and storytelling connected to STEM. Wanted to just mention a couple things before we jump into the discussion, and that is when Tara was talking about the STEM K-12 funding program. If you have an idea, please send us a concept document. The best way to know where your idea fits and how it fits is to send us a 1 to 2 page concept document, and that can be sent to just the generic STEM K-12 email or a specific program officer if you know somebody and you have their email address, because that helps us point you in the right direction. That's number one. Number two is even though STEM K-12 has a $750,000 maximum budget that's listed in the solicitation, we are aware and know that for media projects, you need more than that. And so if you're working on a project and you require more than $750,000, you can ask for it as long as you provide justification. So whether it's a media project, a museum exhibit, anything that's going to reach large numbers of people. Okay. So just wanted to put those two things out there. And then so let's open it up for questions. I'll kind of seed the questions until they fill up in the chat um, by asking a question to both teams, and that is, um, when you're creating these, immersive and media-rich environments, what are your guidelines or design principles that you use as a part of creating those environments? And I'll go to Kevin, since Kevin and his team, since we have the same name, and I always look when somebody calls him.
I know it's confusing, isn't it? Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the first thing is to really try to know your audience. I mean, that was one of the things that we tried to do at the start, was to figure out, what is the age group that we're trying to target. And then also, I would say in all of our projects, because we've been working with scientists, my experience is, right, like a lot of the times science people really care a lot about accuracy. And we care about accuracy too, but there's a point that you have to abstract. And I feel like we would oftentimes have a little bit of push and pull sometimes of like, okay, we want to get this right, but like what level of abstraction can we do so that somebody who isn't familiar with all these other mechanics can understand the overall point. And I think that when finding that balancing act can be really tough, but when you get it, boy, it really I think can resonate both directions. And I feel like there's times where we had scientists who maybe came in a little bit who were a little skeptical at some of these abstractions that we'd start to make, but would be really pleased with the end result. Monet, do
Yeah.
you want to add anything to that?
To your point, I think the strength of our project early on was that we brought everybody into the same room, right?
Yeah.
So we brought everybody in the same room and collaborated on those designs. So if you play something like Weather Station, it looks a lot like it actually would look like, except for, the panel that you're working on is very much more a gamified panel. But that was a collaborative effort to make sure it looked enough like it would actually look like, but also work as an educational learning opportunity.
Great, great. Okay, Deb and Patty.
Well, I'll go ahead, Patty.
Awkward silence, and then both of us talk at once. I think that co-creating in communities, especially marginalized communities, is really important. And going in with a sense of humility, asking a lot of questions, and encouraging your collaborators to really help frame the project right from the get-go.
Okay.
I agree with that for this particular project. It's different than what we typically do. And I think with Giant Screen, I don't know if it's the same with VR, but there's so much information that people are getting when they're getting someone talking and music and image and everything's moving faster now too. So I think our brains think you really have to move fast. And also as a producer, you fall in love with all of your ideas. And so I think there's a tendency to want to like load everything up and throw it all in because it's all good. And I think there's a lot to be said for really pulling back and simplifying. And it's also why it is helpful to co-create or test it. Let someone look at your work and see what they're getting out of it before you make your commitments to the final product, because you are probably missing something if you haven't shared it.
Okay, great, great. Still waiting for the chat to just fill up, but here's another question that I'll ask, and that is, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that you faced when putting together or doing this research with youth-centered, focused on youth-centered storytelling? Deb.
I think sometimes we underestimate kids and what they're capable of. And I think you can learn a lot from the specific group of kids that you're working with. One size does not fit all. So I think it's important to have your process configured so that you can learn about who you're working with and what their strengths and interests are before you fully dive in and try to make it work.
Mm-hmm. And another part to that question is, was there anything that surprised you on your project, Patty or Deb?
Well, I didn't grow up on my reservation, and you see statistics like, okay, this community, 35% of Bad River residents live below the poverty line, and it's just an abstraction. And then, we would begin our workshops, and the kids would arrive, just dead tired and realize they hadn't had breakfast that morning. And so all of a sudden I'm pivoting from being a media producer to just trying to make sure there's snacks and wholesome food available for the kids because you can't learn if you're asleep or hungry. So some of those issues were surprising to me, and it, and I won't say that they're universal problems in all Native communities, but I think it's something that maybe producers ought to think about if they're working with marginalized communities, any marginalized community.
Okay, great. And then Monet and Kevin, what same question, what were some of the biggest challenges and what were some things that surprised you? And then we'll go to the chat.
Yeah, I'll go maybe a slightly different direction, but one that I think our whole project team has been thinking through is we had a lot of experience on our team working in K-12. And I will say we went in thinking that we could use a lot of those same methodologies in libraries, and that they're just totally different animals. And there's parts of that that worked really well, and there's parts of that that we realized, libraries are just really, really diverse. I think is one of the biggest takeaways is that these libraries throughout the state have such different needs and resources. And I've been so happy that we've had a person from Department of Public Instruction to talk through because we'll have these questions of like, how does this work? How do budgets work? What is a we had a question just like, do more people in the library give you more resources? And something as simple as that, because we were thinking like, oh, we're going to drive traffic to your library. That's going to be a really good thing for you, right? And it's kind of like, well, kind of. You know? Monet, you want to add to that?
Well, I think even from trying to understand the implications of the work we're doing, so as I said, I'm the director of evaluation, like as we've thought about the evaluation plans, like how are we understanding what the impact and influence is, or even how we form it? So doing some formative evaluation, that plan has consistently changed because of the environments in which we're working and how we're trying to work with people rather than at people. And so because we're trying to work with the librarians, that evaluation plan has been really surprising, like what we're trying to learn. Like the empathy thing was not an original plan. It's something that came out of what we were understanding as we were doing the work. So there's been some really surprising and interesting things that we found as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. And one of the questions in the chat ask, how are you leveraging the funding that you received to continue to do the work, even amidst the changes in priorities with federal organizations?
Kevin, I can't speak to it, but I think open game data has been something that will continue to build and do. And I think you'd be a better person to speak to that. And then within Institute for Learning Innovation, we've been having a lot of conversations about what does it mean to work with rural libraries, because we've had several projects over the years. So we're continuing to think forward about how does work like this continue to inform how we support and show up for rural libraries. And so I know we're having some internal conversations about how we take this work and continue to move that forward.
Okay.
But I think the open game data also, Kevin, is a big one that the good learning space.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of an interesting resource, but I have a student who tried to go and just be like, because as we tried to publish this, it's like, what else is out there like this? And we can't find anything. To just have these really comprehensive logs on what people do and where they go, and then to try to tie those back to all kinds of different outcomes, I think is something, in all honesty, for my team, we're going to be spending years just trying to figure out, looking through this data to see what we can kind of pull out of it, because it's such interesting pieces of data that what we're even seeing in our most recent paper is that we could develop a predictor in one game and that it would translate into another game. So that's really interesting. It means that we're not overfitting our AI algorithms, but that data is just passively coming in. It's amazing. Like it's just every month we just get a new data dump of here's what people did. And so it's been fun to play with.
Okay. We'll do one more question. So Patty and Deb, do you want to answer that question? How do
I
you
think
keep it
Deb,
going?
I think Deb should answer this because I have just retired and this project is my last academic endeavor. So,
I
Deb?
keep roping her in. I mean, I think that what comes from the work that we've done so far are really great models that make sense, not just in the context that we tested them in, but in many, many environments. And I think the outcomes of being part of science communication, science storytelling, are really positive. It's a very cool moment that we're in, I think, with digital technology making all of this accessible to people. And there's so many new voices and perspectives that we can get into the picture. Like the messages of our film are about collaborating and being part of science and belonging. And I think that that is relevant everywhere to everyone. That's our, big overarching goal. And so I think we can take what's come of Patty's work and the work that we're still doing and apply it in lots of new and exciting ways.
Great, great. Well, thank you all. Thank you for the attendees. Thank you for your presentations. And now I'll turn it over to Kim, who's going to close out.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Kevin. I just have a couple of quick closing slides that I'd like to share. And can you see it? It's not loading for me for some reason.
We can't see it, Kim.
Would you mind trying to share?
Yeah, I'm gonna try right
Okay.
now.
If not, I can just put everything in the chat.
Can you see?
Yep. So this is our brief post-event survey. If you could just go here and take 5 minutes to fill this out, it will help inform our future events, and we would love for you to fill that out. And then you can go to the next slide since we're over. And we just wanted to remind you that we do offer a free EBSCO account. There are lots of great resources on this topic, as well as lots of other informal science topics. And then next slide. These are all the ways that you can connect with us, and I hope that you will connect with us and come to more of our events like this. And thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all.
Right.